Maybe it's really late and you've stumbled into this strange corner of the internet where weird people talk about building homes inside of shuttle buses. Well, if you did, you might have found an expert. Maybe you didn't find an expert, but maybe you did. It's YouTube. Who knows? Let's have fun. Episode 16, here we go.
Right across this country into the starlight. 12,000 miles, turn back, do it again. No destination, it's just a journey. You were my lover and friend.
Welcome back. This is episode 16. We are talking about mounting our gray water tanks, installing the faucets. We have the Quora fireballs that we are talking about, and a bunch of other little things that we had to get done this week. Let's just jump right into it with the biggest project this week, which was mounting the gray water tanks. We decided to do 2 separate gray water tanks. This is just because of how the underside of the bus is organized, where our support beams are. We didn't have a good spot for one large tank, so we decided to split them up into 2.
That's right, and we didn't really want to run a pipe all the way the length of the bus through the wheel well and all of that to reach the shower back to tanks in the back. So we gave a separate tank for the shower up front and a tank for the sink in the back, both on the same side, so draining will be not too difficult. That was one of the problems we had to solve. You don't want to pull up somewhere to drain, you gotta put the hose on 2 sides of the bus. So we figured that out and it looks good.
The shower gray water tank is 18 gallons and it's located right underneath where the shower is. And the second gray water tank is more in the back corner of the bus, and that is 25 gallons.
First up was getting back in the dirt and rolling around into the bus, figuring out where these tanks were going to get mounted and how we could secure them. Similar to the propane tank, it's going to be a lot of problem solving of how are you going to strap that into the frame so it's secure and not in the way of anything.
The biggest hurdle with deciding how you're going to mount these tanks is the weight of them while you're driving and all the vibration and the rattling. Water weighs just over 8 pounds per gallon, 8.35 I think. So you have to multiply that by the size of your tank, and that is how many pounds is going to be inside of this tank and strapped to the bottom of your bus. You have to assume you're going to be driving at least at some point with it full. So it needs to be attached to your frame. However you're mounting it, it needs to be really strong and be able to hold the maximum weight that that tank could potentially be holding.
With each tank, it was going to be a little bit different mounting process, but let's start with the back one. We got under the bus and we measured the spaces to see what was available. Then we went online and we found the largest gallon capacity that would fit in those dimensions. Can be a little tricky. They make them in different shapes, but you gotta hopefully find one that lines up with what you have available. So we ordered the tanks. Once the tanks were delivered, we pulled them out of the boxes. We're really excited to size it up and figure out the mounting. And the back tank scared me for a second. I could not get it to go up there. I didn't account for the back of the bus tapers just a bit, and I must have measured, I don't know, a foot in front of that. And I had to, fortunately, squeeze it in, just pull the fiberglass a little bit. Luckily, there's some play there. And it had to go over the exhaust, so it just made it. I was not happy, but then I figured it out. We're good to go. Now, how are we going to mount this thing? So we had to make some sort of a strapping that would go the length of the tanks around them. At first, I didn't think I'd be able to drill through and get a bolt on the other side and lock that down with a nut because the frame goes up into the floor. But then I realized where that was in the bus was under the bed, which there's no obstruction. So I just had to drill through those metal square tubing and then through all the layers of wooden insulation. Luckily, there's nothing in the way there. And I figured out that I could drill them out from inside with a hole saw and countersink. So I drilled all the wood out down to the metal tubing, and then was able to feed the bolt through that way. So once we figured that out, it was back to how are we going to make the straps that will hold the tank, and how are you going to connect that?
Really, this is a problem that you can avoid if you just mount your gray water tanks before you do your subfloor. If we were to do this again, we would probably put the gray water tank in right in those beginning stages. We would mount the propane tank and we would mount the gray water tank when the floor was pulled and it was all completely raw inside. We had pulled all the panels off. You could see the framing. It would be so much easier to mount it and just get it positioned correctly. So that's kind of our advice. If you're in the beginning stages, think about those gray water tanks.
Yes. After talking through a few different ideas of how exactly to strap these tanks up there, we decided we would make 2 brackets that essentially sandwich the tank together and then join those with a nut and a bolt after we mounted the first one. We sheared the metal to size, marked it to punch the holes in where the bolts would go through. After that, we went over and bent it to the angles we needed to match the angles of the tank, and it was pretty much ready to go. So the first one, we also had to figure out how does that secure. We had drilled the holes through the floor and we'll just put a bolt through, but then we were running into the issue of the bolt would actually be pushing on the tank and rubbing on it. So what we decided to do was get threaded rod and cut the hole where the bolt would be, but then weld that in. So on the other back side of the strapping, it's just smooth metal. So now there's nothing digging into the tank with vibration over time that would eventually probably eat its way through and create a leak.
At that point, we took it outside and gave it a good coat of black paint so that it won't rust underneath the bus. Once the brackets were fully made, the last thing we really did was to just add some foam adhesive strips to the inside of the bracket where it would touch the tank, just because the tank is plastic, and again, with the vibration of a vehicle, it could rub on the tank and eventually create a hole or a weak spot, something you definitely don't want in a water tank. So we just put this foam on there to hopefully kind of space it out a little bit and make sure it's not rubbing.
One more problem we had to solve with this was the front of the tank needed to be a bit lower to allow for where the pipe came out to make a turn and then go into the tank. If it was up all the way, it would have been too high, and the drain pipe from the sink would have had a low point before that, which wouldn't work. So we had to come up with a way to space that. So we just cut a 1.5 inch piece of square tubing, put that between the bracket and the frame before I bolted it in, and that created that little angle. And it's also nice because it's got the tank tilted toward the drain side, which will help it drain more efficiently, and nothing should be left in there even if you're on like a slight angle and you're draining it.
Now that we had the holes through the framing of the bus, the first bracket was up there, the tank was inside of it, and the bottom bracket was bolted to the top bracket, that tank was mounted. That 25-gallon tank that will connect to our sink was finished.
The last step of mounting these tanks was getting the 18-gallon tank underneath the shower. It was a similar process, so it went a lot faster than the first one, but we didn't have to space it out to account for that angle. And the only difference was we had to do the straps left to right. We went back and used the same plating that's welded into the frame that we use for our propane tanks, and basically mounted it the same way we did with the propane tank, where we mounted the strips of metal into those plates. They have the bend to go around the tank, and then just sandwiched it in just like the back tank.
Now that both tanks were fully mounted and fully secured underneath the bus, we have the 25-gallon gray water tank that is just for the sink and the 18-gallon gray water tank that is just for the shower. Next up is one of the most exciting finishing features for the kitchen, and that is our faucets.
Oh, yeah.
There are 2 faucets in this bus, same as we have in ours, which is a black faucet and a silver one. The black one is your main faucet, hot or cold water coming out of your fresh water tank. The second faucet is silver. It's a little bit smaller, and that is connected to the APEC 3-stage water filter. We personally drink out of our fresh water tank, but you never know the source that you're going to be getting your fresh water from. It could really be anywhere. These fill stations that are marked on things like iOverlander, you really don't know. So when we're drinking the water, we like to put it through this APEC 3-stage water filter and just have a little bit more peace of mind as to the water that we're drinking. The first step for these faucets was to drill a hole in the countertop. This really thick 1.5 inch butcher block countertop, we had to get the hole saw out and drill and drill and drill through the countertop. It takes forever to get all the way through, but once we drilled the hole for the main faucet, we put it in there, got underneath and secured it to the countertop, hooked both the water lines up to it, hot and cold, and then we did the same for the water filter line. Comes from the fresh water tank into the water filter and then up into the faucet. If you buy the same water filter, we will link it down below. It comes with the filter, the hoses, and the little faucet. It all comes as a kit together, and we really like that it's all included.
The next step was finishing the plumbing so you could drain the water out of the sink into the tank that we just mounted underneath. With this sink, it's got a different hole than a normal kitchen sink. It's the smaller one that you would find in like a bathroom sink. So you need to get the drain that correlates to that and fits that properly. From the drain, it goes into the P-trap, and then you just have to figure out a route out of your bus. For us, the wheel well was right underneath where the sink is, so we couldn't go straight down and out. I had to bring it to the back, to the side of the bus, and then through the wall that goes back underneath the bed. Once I had it out there, I could bring it straight down. I had to make sure to line that up with where the tank would be, which is on the other side of the bus. So that pipe that runs over the frame to that tank was parallel. This was a little tricky. I kind of sized it up before the tank was up, but I waited until the tank was secured, because once that's locked in, that's a fixed point. Once that was there, I could work back from that and make sure it was all perfect. So once you figured out the route to get the water out of the bus into your tanks, make sure you put all the pieces together without gluing them at first. So, in case you made a mistake, you can fix it. Once you have that figured out, you just get the primer and the PVC cement. You do the primer, and then you follow it right up with the cement. Stick them together. Try not to pass out from the fumes. I don't know if you need like a special mask for these if you're doing it on an industrial level, but it's pretty bad. Make sure you have open air. I made sure that the doors were open and only did one at a time because it's horrible. Once you have that, just hold it together and just do one piece at a time, and it should be really solid. And then once you're under the bus, you may have to find a way to just sort of strap it in so it can't move. Maybe like a really large wire harness or something like that will do the trick.
Now with both our faucets installed and connected to the fresh water tank and the filters, the drain was installed and the plumbing ran out of the bus and into the sink gray water tank. That area was all buttoned up and ready to go. We are excited to be talking about our first partner with this build. It is pretty tough to get us on board with a brand and to recommend them to you. It has to be something that we really like or we have used a lot in the past for us to fully put our name behind it and recommend it. This next partner we are excited about because we have seen way too many bus fires. If we've seen one bus fire, we've seen too many.
Yeah.
So we are partnering with Quora Distribution to recommend for your build, for protecting your build, these AFG fireballs. Aren't they cute? This one's so cute.
Yeah, they're
This
pretty
one's so
fun.
small.
Yeah.
These fireballs are a way to protect your tiny home, your bus, your van, your house, anything from fire. It is sort of an alternative to a fire extinguisher. And we love these fireballs because they work whether you are present or not. It is 24/7 protection for your home, unlike a fire extinguisher, which you have to be present to use. It is our opinion that safety is way too often overlooked with these builds. It's really fun to talk about all the flashy, exciting parts of the build, like your projector and your countertops and the colors and the floors, but if you are not protecting your build from a preventable catastrophe, you could lose everything that you've built, and we definitely don't want that. So this fireball will protect you if you are not in your bus, but if you are in your bus and a fire breaks out, you can actually throw it or roll it into the fire. These are safe, they're environmentally friendly, they're way nicer looking than a fire extinguisher.
Yeah.
So you can place them all around your bus. We are going to put these in the new build as well as our own bus right near the Dickinson propane heater that we talked about last week, near the kitchen, and also this little tiny one will be going in with all of the electrical components to stop an electrical fire if that were to ever happen.
Let me explain what these do, first of all, because when I was, I think, working on the bus and you came in and you said all about this, all I heard was Fireball, and I was like, you're like, yeah, they want to partner with us. I'm thinking Fireball, like those little shot things, and I'm like, that's really strange. I don't know why she's so excited. But then show me the video, and what these do, which is really cool, is you place them where there could be a fire, and if it reaches a certain temperature, it explodes a dry suppressant that will put the fire out. They have great demo videos on their website and on YouTube. It's really cool. I'd never heard of them, but I think it's an awesome product and way better than the malt beverage of the same name.
Absolutely. These are good for 15 years. They put out several classes of fires. So go on their website, check them out. It is so worth including these in your build. We now have 3 in our bus. There will be 3 included with the sale of the new bus. We are just really excited to be talking about safety with these builds, which, like we said, we think is so often overlooked. We all work so hard on these builds to not protect them from something that is preventable. So go to their website, we'll leave the link down below, and check them out. Next up this week was to finish the interior of the closet at the end of the bed. Way back in the beginning part of our build series, we talked about this closet that's kind of a funky shape in the bus, and that's because we had to build the bottom out of the closet so that we had enough room for the bed, but we could still utilize that space. This week was all about framing out the interior of the closet, adding shelves and drawers, and making sure that that storage space is maximized to its full potential. The first thing to do was to cut the divider for the middle of the closet. Because we have sliding bypass doors, you can't really access that middle section, so we like to cut the closet in half and essentially make 2 separate sections. This is really great if there are 2 people living in this bus. With our closet, one side is for Drew and one side is for me. We put a few shelves going from bottom to top in the closet and kind of walled off the bottom storage space with a little door. So you could store anything down underneath here, and essentially it's going to be at the end of the bed below the mattress. So that's just kind of bonus storage space. In the middle of the shelves, I made 2 different drawers. They're just little boxes with a lid. And we got teeny tiny little drawer slides. I think they're like 5 or 6 inches, and mounted them to the drawers, put them into that little space. So now there's a drawer on each side of the closet. I added a lid onto both of these drawers, and that's because in our bus, this drawer is a vanity for myself. I put a mirror onto the bottom side of the lid, so when you pull it out and open it up, I have my hair straightener, I have my makeup in there, and the lid now has a mirror on it, so I can sit there and I can do my hair and makeup. We play shows when we're on the road, so it's a great place to get ready, and I think it's a good use of that space. The last step was to put the strip lights all around the inside of the closet to light the whole area up. We are anti-dark storage spaces, so this was another great spot for the strip lights. With the doors, the lights, the shelves, the drawers, and the under storage compartment, this closet is officially finished.
The last thing this week was to finish the last few cedar planks on the ceiling above the couch. We had to hold off on this until the wiring was complete. And for the other thing we had to put in was the pendant light. So we had to make sure we had that in, the wire coming through safe, secure to its power source in the little cupboard. But once that was done, we could finally close the rest of the ceiling off, and felt so good. It made it feel complete. It made it just feel so much more homey.
This pendant light is really cute. It's similar to the one that's in our bus. When we were designing our bus, I wanted a pendant light, but so many of them were glass or left the bulb exposed. And in a bus, when you're driving around, the pendant light could swing. It's right next to that upper cabinet, and you don't want the bulb to shatter and break, or if the outside of the light is glass, that's just an accident waiting to happen. So I always look for pendant lights that have some sort of soft organic material on the outside.
The main thing this pendant light is achieving is just another really nice aesthetic, but it has a practical use as well. So if you have the table set up and you're having dinner or friends over for dinner, you have a nice light right above shining down almost like you're in a little restaurant.
More mood lighting.
Yes.
First, we drilled a hole into the ceiling and ran the wires for the actual light itself. Next was to cut a piece of plywood and mount it underneath where the ceiling panels needed to extend so that there was something to glue and attach those ceiling planks to. These are the same cedar planks that we used for the rest of our ceiling. We're just continuing it down. The last part was to frame out the top of the window. This is just an extension of the rest of the window framing that was already there. We just had to finish out the top part. The ceiling was extended, the pendant light was installed, the window framing was finally finished. Eventually we will be doing a coat of paint on that window framing, but it looks really good.
Yeah.
The light matches the rest of the bus and kind of adds an even more organic feel to that space. Alright guys, that's it for episode 16. We are moving through this build and we're getting to the very last stages. Next week is going to be a huge week where we finish the bathroom. Trust us, this is going to be a really good episode and you are going to want to see how this bathroom turns out. We talked about a lot of products in this episode, so check them all out in the description below. We want to say a huge thank you to our Patreon family. Thank you for being there for us and supporting us through this build. Until next time.
Yeah, and if anybody else is building right now, keep at it. Keep your head up. It's very frustrating. You'll get there. We'll catch you next time. Have a good one.